Ezekiel 28, the king of Tyre, is literally a former guarding cherub in my garden. Garden is Eden. And you remember from the Garden of Eden story, the garden guarding cherub with the flaming swords. So that was a specific role. Well, that one of them angels come down and decided to be a king of Tyre and was doing bad stuff. And the prince of Tyre was getting rich off his special knowledge. Now, isn't that something that we hear about in Enoch and all these other books about special knowledge? Daniel 10 says, the angel's talking to Daniel and says, we heard you in heaven. I've been trying to get down here for months. The evil spirit over Persia would not allow me to come in, and I had to get Gabriel. So that's a lot to unpack there, because that's showing different roles, different strengths upon the angels. It's, why could one hold back one and then he has to go get another one?
Right.
So those are examples of what the Nephilim were doing beyond changing us. And then in the Living Bible, Nimrod is mentioned as the first king, right? Not just the mighty hunter. And now also the Amalekites. And I tried to nail this in 5 stones visually, because that's an argument. Why did God ask for, call for somebody to die? Like, that's not a God thing. Research who the Amalekites are. First, the lickers of blood was what they're accepted as known.
Yeah.
So and they come from the Esau line and the Edomites and stuff like that. Now,
I actually think they were vampires.
There were nasty people. Yeah. And we'll get into that too. But in Esther, the book of Esther, Haman is trying to kill a bunch of Jews, and they end up, having to take care of him, and he dies and blah. Well, he is an Agagite. And in the Orthodox Jewish version, there's a note for Numbers 24:7, which goes back to the story of Baalbek, which is really crazy with the talking donkey. But the significance is referencing essentially Amalek was one of the first nations. So we're one of the first kings. And what it is basically saying that my king will be better than Agag. So what does that mean? That Agag was known in the land. He was like a big thing. So that's more evidence of angels, beyond Gen 6 being here and changing and doing things. And then you, like I said, you apply that God says you don't need a king. Look how we're governed. Look how everything is. It's like, and that's why too, I feel like that's why there's such a hard push to, if you say giants or hybrids, you're a weirdo, you're a conspiracy theorist. It doesn't make any sense, because they're going to try to hide the evidence.
Yeah. And so when, and again, that's when I look into, when I started going down here and I looked into the journey, what actually got me to go into the rabbit hole full bore was the story of Jericho. How God said, go in there and kill everything. And it specifically says the dogs, the donkeys, everything, kill everything. And then you go in and you read about who the people were that lived there. And you have a lot of people, they call them fringe people. They were shapeshifters. They will tell you that's why he said you have to be sure to kill everything in there. In fact, I think it was Jericho where they didn't do it, and he made them go back in there and do it. I think they went in there, took care of the men, but it's like, no, go back in there. And specifically he said, don't take anything from this city. Nothing, no gold, no nothing or whatever. And I thought, reading that, I thought to myself, like, dang, that's cold, right? That's harsh, right? And then somebody does, and it goes bad for them, and he has the whole family stoned to death and killed. And then, but when you read, when you go and read what they would call the non-canon books, which I hate that word, by the way, you go and you read these books, and you learn that those were descendants of Nephilim, or those were something entirely different. That those were something that were at a base level. They weren't human like we are today. They were something else, and there was a reason why he said you have to kill everything in this city, right? And it never inhabited. I think it even says never inhabited here, never build anything here, never do anything here, right? And that right there, when you see that God's plans are, you're like, okay. And I don't like that when they go in there and they take those cliff notes out because I don't. One of my favorite verses, I talk about this all the time, is iron sharpens iron, right? And you got to give the hard truths, man. It can't, yes, you can't, Jesus is important. He is the whole reason, right? But it ain't all about forgiveness and turning the other cheek in there. When Jesus even told his people, man, sell your cloaks and buy a sword. I'm sending you out as among sheep among the wolves. That, and meek doesn't mean weak. Doesn't mean bend over and get your head chopped off, right? So, yeah, and I think too, to add up on and to add to the your story there is about, I have my opinion on why they changed it, right? And I don't have any concrete evidence on this, but it was 100% done by the Pharisees at one point, because the people that fought that war with David, they knew the truth. There was a reason why they just stood there and stared at each other, right, for the longest time. It wasn't just some big dude over there, right? Like Shaq holding a spear was not the reason why they didn't do it. There was reasons, right? They knew, right? And I think they stood there for like 20 some days or something like that, and they would sing and taunt each other, right? But as it goes down, and as David goes, and does his thing, and then a lot happens between David and Jesus' arrival, right? They build the temple, they sacrifice their children, they do exactly what God tells them not to do. They adopt, I don't know, I think it was Solomon got heavily into witchcraft, that's where there is no Star of David. That's totally a witchcraft symbol. So in order for them to continue to I would say not to push the narrative that they did all this as themselves, and so that you never hear the Pharisees or anybody talk about the mighty men or anything like that. It's the Jews. We did it. We did this. We did that. It was us. It was us. It was us, right? And I'm like, well, you had some help. I'm not saying that God wasn't there, right? So God gave you these people, but there's some lion-faced dudes in there. Well, and then there was a couple of the big guys there probably stole some things. I think even David, one of his guys, had 100 kills with 99 or 100 kills with a spear or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And back that day, man, you had to go undefeated, bro. You know what I'm saying? He was 99-0. Yeah. So yeah. Anyways, Adam, good stuff, bro. Yeah.
Yeah.
Subscribe now and turn on the notifications to join us on this extraordinary journey into the unknown.